Hi, and welcome to Link4Growth's very, very special TV episode this week. I'm Carol Dodsley, and I'm the host for today, and I have with me Alex Murray, who is the district leader for Link4Growth. I have Chris Ogle, or Ogle, I'm never quite sure how to say it, who is the founder of Link4Growth, and we have a very, very special guest, which is actually, this is quite a breakthrough hangout today, because we have Richard Harrington, Watford MP, with us, which we believe is a very first live hangout done with a live UK MP. So let me go over and let's say hello to Alex, our district leader. Say hello, Alex.
Hi, Carol. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Not too bad.
Cool. And now let's go to Chris and Richard together, because Chris is actually at Richard's offices with him. So hi, Chris. Hi, Richard.
Good afternoon. Very nice to be here.
Yeah, hi Carol. Yeah, it's a nice sunny and warm day here in the office.
As it always is in Watford, for those people watching that are not from Watford, it's always warm and sunny.
Cool. And just for those people that have never met Richard or Chris, would you both like to tell everybody which one of you is which?
I'm Richard.
And I'm Chris.
Sometimes we forget that because we know who we are and we're talking, but there could be people here that are watching who have never heard of any of us, which is why it's always important to use our names as well. Okay, so I'm going to come over to Richard. And Richard, just tell us a little bit about yourself and why you got interested in politics.
Well, yes, Carol, I'm unusually, I didn't actually stand for Parliament until I was 52 years old. I'm 56 now. So most of my life was in business, which is why, for me, Link4Growth is such an important organisation in the way it puts people together with business and encourages people to start businesses, because that's really what I did. And I didn't really think very much about politics. I did it when I was at university, because I was lucky enough to go to university, and in fact, the first member of my family ever to go to university, and I studied law, which I hope there's no lawyers watching. It's like the most boring subject I've ever done in my life. And I got really interested in politics then. But following that, I thought, well, I didn't have any money and I was interested in business, so I really went down the small business route after some time at John Lewis Partnership. And then I became interested in politics later, simply because I got fed up of everybody criticising politicians, including myself, and someone said, well, instead of going on about it, why don't you try and do something about it? And I did, really. I know that's a bit of an oversimplification. But, I mean, I often tell, much to the amazement of all the school groups in Watford, I've actually voted for all three political parties in my life, and I don't see anything wrong with that. I would argue that my views have remained the same, they've changed. But, you know, I don't think we need just people who are kind of political fanatics. It's good to have professional politicians, and when you meet these people like Cameron and Miliband and Clegg, I mean, they know the ropes very well. They're very clever people, irrespective of their views. And of course we need those. But I just feel for people of my age and with a business background, we've also got stuff to add.
And you know, just listening to you talk there, it was like, wow, is this guy really an MP? Because that is one of the first times that I've actually heard an MP or somebody from, you know, in politics talk like a human being. It's brilliant.
Well, I've been accused of many things, Carol. Being a human being does not happen a lot these days, but I appreciate it. Thank you.
So just tell us, Richard, a little bit about what you've achieved since you were, have you been, is it 3 or 4 years now since you were actually elected?
4 years now, surprisingly. Sometimes it seems like 40, but it is 4 years. And in terms of what I feel I've personally achieved, that means things... obviously, I very much support what the government's done. I believe very much in the coalition government and what it's done. But from a personal point of view, I think I've had 1 or 2 wins for Watford. One of the main ones being the huge increase in apprenticeships and jobs in the town, which I can't claim full credit for, but I've promoted a lot. I have a jobs fair every year, and I'm very pleased to say that unemployment's come down from 2010 from 3,900 people to 1,400 last week, which I'm very pleased about, and I'm pleased to have played with a lot of people. I'm pleased to have played my part in it. And then secondly, we've got, this won't mean much to people outside Watford, but we've got the money from the government, and construction has started for a big rail link, which will link Watford Junction station with the Met Line. and have 2 new stations, one of which is in West Watford, Vicarage Road, for those of you to football supporters, which, apart from the hospital and the football ground, the significant thing is it's one of the poorest wards in east of England, and of course a new station there will really boost it up. And the other one being on Ascot Road, which is near where all the business park is. So I think that transport link to bring Watford into the really for the future is very important, and I think we'll find, I believe so, we'll find headquarters of big American companies and such like opening up, because it's on the tube line for them, which is important. Communications are really, really important, and it's something that is one of those things. There's a lot of things in Watford that the public think will never happen. I mean, my late father told, when they started talking about building the shopping centre, which became the Harlequin, now it's called Into, he said, it'll never happen. You'll see it will never happen. Well, it did. The Croxley rail link's another thing. People said will never happen, and works actually started, because the original Met Line station is in the middle of effectively a suburb. It just stopped because the landowner, who was called, I think it was Lord Clarendon, one of these very wealthy aristocratic families, refused to allow a train to go on his land because it would disturb his cows. Seriously, that's why it ended up there in the first place. With a great irony, it's taken all these years to change it. But seriously, I mean, transport links are very important. We have loads of people that commute to London. We want people coming here. We want people saying, well, why should I have very expensive offices in the West End of London when I've got people for high-quality jobs with high-quality lifestyles? We want them in Watford, and I think that's why the transport link's so important. So I know I've gone on a lot, but I've put those 2 as the top 2 things that I feel I can't say I've achieved on my own, but I've been part of achieving that will make a big difference to the town.
Brilliant. That's really good. And don't worry about going on at all. That's fine.
I thought no one wanted to listen to Chris, so you know.
Well,
I'd rather talk to him after this.
Well, I will butt in slightly there, because I mean I do a lot of travelling around the country, and people say, they say, where are you from? And I say, I'm from Watford, and you get the Watford. You get that rather. It's slightly negative, but it's not as bad as some towns. But the thing is that with Watford,
keep Luton out of it.
you get 60% of the population by car in 2 hours.
Yeah,
that's a phenomenal place to live.
And it's true. And even now, you have to, if you look at some of the big brand names that are based here, well, just at random, you know, TK Maxx based here. The Wix DIY thing, they're just located the headquarters building here.
Yep.
There's a big American company called Medtronic. Lots of these companies, they're thinking in money terms, you know, why should we pay 3 times as much for offices in London? But they're also thinking of their staff, because we've got very good quality education here. Obviously, the transport links are important. And I think the way things are going with technology, my prediction is, we were funny enough just talking about it before we came on air, my prediction is that over the next few decades, fewer people will commute into London. The facilities need to be there, because a lot of people will do what I do, which is going in and out 2 or 3 times a day. In an extreme day, I mean, I did it yesterday because I had something in Watford in the morning, then I had to go back to London, then I had an event in the afternoon, and then I had to go and vote in the Queen's speech, and then I came back to speak at a dinner. Well, actually, it's okay for Watford, for me, really, because I can do that. But I think more people, particularly when the tube link will allow people to, it's not just like going to Euston and then having to move on. It will include Baker Street, all those other places. So, and the city, of course, without changing. So I think there'll be a lot more of that kind of flexible lifestyle. And I think Watford's in a good place geographically and infrastructure-wise to take advantage of that.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so let's go over to you, Chris. I know you wanted to ask Richard about what the plans and the things he's doing right now.
Yeah, I mean, we'll come on to some of the challenges that we've talked to some of the electorate about, some of the challenges that they think still exist, or perhaps have maybe not been gone down the road that they perhaps would have wanted. But yeah, I mean, this is an interesting stage as an MP. Now, I remember I went to, because I think you're one of the only MPs that runs the trips to Westminster Palace, and you run them fairly regularly for the people in the constituency to go down and actually see what's going on down there. And I remember when you were saying that actually this is probably the worst job you've ever had. Do you want to tell that story? Because I think it's quite amusing.
I can't remember that story.
Well, well, basically you said that
it's the best job I've ever had. No, seriously, everyone should listen to Chris's. I can't remember what I said.
What you said was this is the first job you've had which had no job security.
Oh yes, he's right. He's right. No, well, if you think about it, it's quite. Just say that this is a serious point, but if I'd been doing this 20 years ago with 2 young children, mortgage, the usual kind of paraphernalia of life that one gets, and you know what kind of job, I could be out of a job in a year's time. Plenty of people around want me to be. I don't know, maybe, may not be. Who knows who's going to win the next election? Which is at my age and stage in life, and I've had a business and sold it, fair enough. But if we're to attract people, bright young people as well, people that have got the overhead of normal life, I'm not talking about anything particularly unusual, it is very difficult to plan. MPs are not valued very high in society. Claire Ward, my predecessor, who I commend totally, she was elected for Parliament when she was 23. And to me, that's a fantastic thing. I mean, I disagree with her politics, but I'm talking about as a person.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have had the confidence to do it at her age. But, you know, she found herself at 37, 38. She'd been a minister, she'd been in Parliament for all those years, from Tony Blair's victory in 97 to 2010. She'd been a Minister of the Crown for 7 years, and it still took her more than a year to find a job afterwards. And 2 young children, all that sort of thing. It's not for the faint-hearted.
Mm.
And I think with the democratic system, obviously there's no alternative to that. We want elections over people, but in terms of career choices, it's actually not always easy for people. But I find what Chris was referring to about these visits to Parliament I do, it all came about. I thought, here we are, an hour from London. I mean, we're now 4:15. If we really wanted, we could be in Parliament by 5:15. So, and yet, at least 19 out of 20 people I spoke to here had never been to the House of Parliament. Now, so I wrote to every school and invited school kids to come on a Monday, usually on Monday in the mornings before Parliament opened. But then I thought there's so many people working during the day, so I basically do it on an area by area basis every other week. We hire a couple of coaches. People pay the coach driver. I don't get involved in the financial side of it, but it's only £6. I mean, it's quite reasonable for an evening out. And they arrive in Watford they leave Watford about 6 o'clock, 5:45, so it fits in with a lot of working lives. They're there about 7 o'clock usually, and then I do a talk for an hour, and I don't get involved in politics. I really, people's politics, it's none of my business. You know, this is a parliamentary thing, but I tell them about what the job's like and how their MP, whoever that person might be, can make a difference in making laws. I talk about my private member's bill, which became law, which I could call for England on, but it's how you take a piece of legislation through Parliament to become law, and things that people don't, I mean, they just see Prime Minister's Question Time, they see people shouting and screaming, and it's theatrical, isn't it? In fact, David Cameron always tells the story that, a true story, he went to New York before he became Prime Minister, and to some event with, you know, Bloomberg, the Mayor of New York, and they're at some big charity event. Of course, everyone's taking notice of Bloomberg. They're all going, "Hey, Mike, you're a great mayor," all that sort of stuff. Excuse my lousy American accent. And so one guy came up to Cameron and said, "Hey, Cameron, I love your show." I mean, they think Parliament's a show over there. Well, I show people when they come from Watford, I show them where the real scrutiny of bills takes place. In a boring committee room, yeah, it's broadcast and recorded and all that, but no one, you know, except real anoraks take any notice. But that's where the real democracy is, and I think people have a right to see that. And then, so we do that for about an hour, and then we just break into groups, myself and my colleagues, and we show them around, really. It's just like the historical stuff and into the chamber and everything. And it's very popular. And I think if we're going to get people to vote more, and we need people to vote more, obviously I want them to vote Conservative, but as long as they vote, good, you know. But we want people to vote more. And I believe in lowering the age of voting to 16. I believe in getting children around Parliament. And I think it should be a lot more accessible to people. So I tended to have concentrated on that sort of thing. which I suppose is a bit like more of a kind of Thomas Cook tour than debating the great political issues. But I think it's important, and we're lucky here. Again, you know, colleagues that have got constituencies in Scotland or North of England, people would have to stay overnight, be fed on the way. I mean, the whole thing's much more complicated.
Yeah.
And I think it is far more accessible than people think. Once people see it, and they actually speak to an MP live, their own one, they think, well, maybe I should get involved. Maybe I should, you know, because I have to explain that, you know, this is my BlackBerry. If you email me, this is what it comes to. It's not a bank of secretaries in a room somewhere. And yes, you might not get a response till 11 o'clock on Saturday night, and when they see it's like a real person with a real issue, they start to think, well, yeah, I can do something. I can ask questions. I can't always give them the answer they want, of course, but I feel it's all become too remote. And people think of this rubbish in the Daily Mail about us having 180 days holiday a year. They think MPs are swirling around on expenses and everything. And I think, to some extent, that's the fault of MPs, by not getting in close contact with enough constituents.
And can I just come in there, Chris? So as I was listening to Richard there, and that very last point especially, but about MPs not getting in contact with their constituents, you know, I must admit, I don't talk to MPs. I don't even know an MP apart from the fact that I now know you. But I think it is this misunderstanding and all of the hype in the news, which we know that, yes, there might be some not so nice people who fiddle their expenses, but there's a lot of other people like yourself. But we don't actually know they're there or how to connect. And does it make a difference if people that are the constituents, if they talk to their MP, will it actually make a difference? Because I think there's a big feeling that, well, what's the point? Because there's nothing we can do anyway.
Absolutely. It's that they're all the same syndrome, isn't it? Well,
Yeah.
but Karen, another thing I do, which is a bit old-fashioned, but every month on a Saturday after I finish my surgery, I hold a public meeting in one area of the community, of the constituency. So, for example, last week I was in Abbots Langley, the next time it'll be in Carpenter's Park. I move it around, and there's no agenda. I do a report, like a kind of, it's akin to, it's like you're the shareholders, i.e. the public. I mean, it's like a business with the shareholders. I'm like the management, if you like, because I'm to be questioned by the shareholders. So I hand a report of what I've done in the last month. Or actually, since the last time I was in that particular part of the constituency at one of these. And I don't do a speech. If I claim expenses, which I actually don't, but there will be a column in for that. What questions I've asked to ministers, what my diary has been for the last month. I mean, not on a Sunday when I'm at home, but, you know, it's like public time paid for by the taxpayer. So, and I think people like that openness. And of course, we'll have a good argument at the public meeting. Some are supporters, some are not. Some will be waving a UKIP flag, some will be protesting about something. But that's fine. And it always remains quite civil, I might say. But it's frustrating. Well, last week in Abbots Langley, about 60 or 70 people came. Sometimes 5 people come. That's from 2,000 leaflets under doors, all delivered by volunteers. But I think the institution should be there. Because people come if they've got something really to complain about, fine. But so it's been too aloof. And it used to be that MPs kind of came to their constituencies almost under sufferance. I mean, if you read in the biographies of the great, like people like Peel and Gladstone, these people, once a year they'd go. And if anyone spoke to them, it was almost not done. Well, we've moved on a lot from that. But even the general MPs, people know they can come to a surgery, but that's usually because a person's got a problem that they want to talk about on a one-to-one basis. Usually, sometimes it's to rant on about whatever their subject is, how bad the NHS is, or Bulgarians, or people are entitled to do that as well, but generally that's more of a kind of confidential one-to-one thing. But I don't think, because of technology, actually, which is generally a good thing, why we're here today, one of the bad things is that people forget the importance of face-to-face communication. And they should question their MPs. And what the Americans call town hall meetings, they happen ironically in America, where the distances are much longer. Apparently there's a lot more of these, and that's all our public meetings are, is what they call town hall meetings. And I think there should be more of it. And we need to get young people involved, because unfortunately, the people that come to my public meetings are predominantly, shall we say, got grey hair. and they're entitled to their say. I suppose younger people, it's hard. Maybe a platform such as this, which is why I fully support it. When Chris mentioned it, I thought maybe I could be one of the first people on it. Maybe younger people will have a look at this, and they will think, well, yeah, he's or she's my MP. You know, it's a way of talking that in a way is a more modern way of talking, I know. But of course, older people probably would prefer not to do that. But I think it's for the MPs, if they want democracy to continue and they want it to have real credibility in people's lives, part of it is access. But the other thing is people being taught from a young age exactly what politics is. Because when kids ask, I say, the news is for you, half of everything you earn in your whole life will be spent by other people other than you. And of course they say, what do you mean? 7, 8-year-old. So, well, okay, you see that can of Coke you're drinking? How much was it? Well, £1. Well, 20p of that is taken from you and is spent by other people, you know, the government or the local council. Well, that all politics is, in its simplest form, is deciding how that money is spent. When you explain it like that, people begin to understand, but in schools don't teach it. And that's why I believe in reducing the voting age to 16, because I think if they taught it in school, in the same way that people are taught religion, you know, by and large, people aren't said, well, that's your religion. They're sort of, here are the main religions, you know, taught properly and objectively in most parts of the country, certainly in Watford, you're taught about it. Well, I think politics should be the same. And I think by that way, that if it comes to 16, if it's sort of encouraged by the school, like this is when you go and vote before you've been to school that morning, and when you come back we'll talk about it or something like that, it'll become something that people do automatically rather than now. I mean, if you take, like in Watford, it is, in 2010, I mean, you would have to have been on another planet if you didn't know there was an election on that Thursday. Everywhere you look, there's boards up, there's leaflets under the door, there's vans going around with vote this one, vote that one. And then there's all the national stuff. Obviously, there's all the media and the usual telly and all this stuff. So it can't be anyone that didn't know there was an election. Still, more than 3 out of 10 people decided not to vote. It's quite tragic, really. You know, when my dad came home from the war in 1945, they all voted. You know, they'd all been away. They all saw what dictatorship did in different ways. I doubt, well, from what he said, everybody voted that could possibly consider voting did. And if you think now, it's just a shame that each time the number of percentage voting. So we've got to do something about it. And I think a more open and relevant democracy is part of it.
Yeah.
Can I just jump in? Sorry, Carol.
You can.
You've answered my question, which I was going to ask: should we be teaching kind of politics in school along religion and languages? Because I had that kind of question, and you've already answered it. But
yes,
I think it's really important.
Alex, I totally agree with that. I think it's a public duty. I don't agree with making voting compulsory, like they do in Australia. But in the end, it should be regarded as being a person's duty that they should do as the very minimum to go out and put a cross on a piece of paper. The reason I don't believe in making it compulsory is because I also believe it's a democratic right not to have a preference. Although the Australians get around that by allowing you to put that down. But I think in the end, you know, it's a democracy, you can't force people. But I think people should think, well, it's the very least I can do. And of course, we should make it easy with electronic voting and all this sort of stuff, because if you can, if you can spend all the money out of your bank account on a reasonably secure way, I'm sure it's not that difficult to make voting with the same level of security. Although I'm sure there would be abuse, but there's abuse anyway. So, if everyone had a PIN number or whatever, I don't quite know how to do it. So yes, encourage people, make it easy for them in a more modern way. But the key is to make them think it's important. And there's no simple solution to that. But yeah, I think education's part of it. And people's habits can change with education. Look at smoking. I know it's not quite like voting, but everyone used to smoke, and society has been conditioned quite correctly by advertising, education, etc. Now a minority smoke. People do change stuff. If you'd have said to me when I got my first bank account that, you know, everyone would just walk up to a hole in the wall. They wouldn't go near their bank. They certainly wouldn't write a cheque. And if they wanted some cash to spend, actually, probably people don't even do that now. But, you know, well, of course, that's become so much part of life, no one even thinks about it. In fact, as I said, it's even now people don't even bother with that. So it is possible to change the way people think. And certainly from a democracy point of view, I don't think we should give up on it. And it's funny because a lot of the traditional, let's call them the more traditional conservatives, said, oh, no, they don't want young people to vote, younger people to vote, for their own reasons, because, you know, probably they think they're all going to vote for the left-wing party, I don't know. And Alex Salmond, when he gave the vote to 16-year-olds for the Scottish referendum, it's interesting, people were saying, well, oh, they're all going, he's given them the vote because they're all going to vote for Scottish independence. In fact, the statistics, the polling shows completely the opposite. They're more likely to vote to stay in. So you can't, I don't think you can take young people's votes or predict what they're going to be. And I think it's a good thing for politicians to argue for them, to try and get their votes. It's different, you know, obviously people think differently at 16 than they do at 80, but they're all citizens, they all have duties and responsibilities, so I think they should all be encouraged to vote.
Yeah.
We're in quite a challenging time, I would guess, as an MP now, because 4 years down, 1 year to go, it's like there's quite a lot of water going under the bridge. What does an MP, how does that change in the last year for the MP? Because clearly there's, if you start a project and it's quite long term, you may not be able to see it through.
Yeah, that's true. But that's true in many jobs. You know, people can be out of a job in a year. I take no notice of the election coming because it's not within my power. In the end, people are going to, the decision they're going to make May the 6th or 7th, whatever it is next year, is really not do I like Richard Harrington or all this. Well, a few people might think that, but it's really who's going to be in Downing Street. Is it going to be Ed Miliband or is it going to be David Cameron? Because it is only going to be one of the two. So I can't let all this short-termism condition me. I can't do it because the taxpayers aren't paying me to get re-elected. They're paying me to do the job of which I'm paid for. And I have to try and separate in my mind those two things. And I hope, and I've never stood in an election before as an MP, remember. I've only stood as a candidate. Well, that was my time. The whole time I could do electioneering. But I hope that it doesn't descend into a year of electioneering, because I think that would be very wrong. And certainly in my planning of the things that I've got on at the moment, I've got a jobs fair in 3 weeks' time, the fourth one I've had with jobs and apprenticeships. I'm encouraging business to invest in Watford, lobbying very heavily now for the hospital to put in a proposal for some new redevelopment to the hospital itself here, because I've seen the Health Minister, Secretary of State for Health about it, and I want to push those things on. I can't think, well, I just want something that's a win in the next few months, because most things to do with public money are not like that. You know, it's a 5-year, 10-year thing. So actually, up to now, I can't say it's made any difference in my thinking at all.
There was a story you told, actually, which would be just worth people hearing. When the day you started as an MP, it was like, people must have a vision where you've got this team of people. Just tell us, because I thought it's hilarious.
It's totally British, the whole thing. You don't. I thought you get a sort of, you know, by courier a delivery. Well, here's your office, here's your staff, here's your budget, here's a program, you know, all this kind of stuff. Well, there's nothing like that. You arrive on the tube at Westminster. Like I tell the school groups, Chris, it's exactly like your first day at school. It is. When you walk in, the one thing they do efficiently, they give you a pass. I mean, it's all prepared with your picture and all that, fair enough. But you're given a locker key, and the locker's got your name on, and a peg with your name on. It's exactly like your first day at school. And of course, just like at school, there's the boys or girls that sort of, you know, the older ones, you know, they sort of walk in like they own the place, and you're there like thinking, should I have brought my PE kit, you know, or something like that. So it is very strange. And I think one thing, having a bit of a business background helps, because at least I know how to organise an office. You know, you've got a budget. You're allowed. They tell you you're actually allowed 3 and a half staff, which I thought was quite strange. But the half I actually found out was a part-timer or intern, which is actually a good thing. But you know, you have to make decisions. Do I have them in my constituency or do I have them in London? What are they actually going to do? What's their roles going to be? Because for me, obviously, again, there's more interchangeability. Jenny here, who you know, Chris, she's half the time here, half the time in London. Of course, if your constituency is in Newcastle, you've got no choice. You've got to have two completely separate operations. So, but there's a lot of things like that. Now, from anyone from any form of business background, that's comparatively easy. If you're a brilliant barrister, and there are quite a few, they've never had to think about that sort of logistical thing. But you're not given an office at the beginning. You're all sort of wandering around like headless chickens, sitting in the cafeteria. I mean, we didn't even know if we were in government or not. So on the first few days, I mean, that's unusual, of course, because normally there's a definitive result in the election, and they know. So I'm sitting there, literally in the cafeteria, sacks of post are arriving. I haven't got an office. I haven't got anyone to deal with it. I don't know what to do. I haven't got a computer. And we are having lectures on where the fire escapes are, that sort of stuff. Meanwhile, people are ringing me up on my phone and saying they think they're watching stuff on Sky and they see Gordon Brown walking into Downing Street, this one, this, all these, and I don't know a thing that's going on. And yet they think that they're ringing me because I'm elected, and people are thinking this is family and friends and constituents. You know, like you know, I'm in on some secret briefing. So it took a bit of time to get used to. And again, I think a bit of more experience in things does help with that sort of thing. I won't say it's intimidating. It's a huge exaggeration. It's not like going over the top in the Battle of the Somme, but you have a responsibility to a lot of people, and it starts straight away. Yeah. You know, people. In fact, it's worse than a normal week now in terms of the volume of people contacting you, because there's been all electioneering for the last few weeks. So people's genuine constituency inquiries about their housing or their treatment they've had at the hospital or some benefit thing or their pensions, the sort of normal MP casework stuff, it's all carried out because there was no one to do it before. So, but any new job takes a bit of getting used to. It's just that in a normal occupation, first of all, you know your job description before you start, and you've usually got a few weeks, you know, your last job or leaving and arranging a date, or you speak. But here, I say to a lot of the sixth formers, I say it's like doing your A-levels on the Thursday, getting the results on the Friday, and starting university on the Monday without knowing whether you're going to go to university or not on the Thursday. So it does take a bit of getting used to.
And, Alex, have you got some questions from the website that from some of the constituents? Because we could probably move on to those.
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions here. One is from the Michael Green Foundation. They are wondering about the new health campus and how are the current issues going to be resolved, kind of surrounding it.
So do you know who the Michael Green Foundation are?
They're the diabetic.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes. Now I know Joanne.
Yeah, Joanne. That's it.
Her husband tragically died of well, he actually died of untreated diabetes.
Yeah, silent heart attack.
He did, yeah. But it was all caused by a diabetic problem which could have been prevented. And she came to see me about that because I'm a patron of theirs.
Yeah.
And they've got a close link with the local hospital. When I visited yesterday, to the diabetic kitchen, which they help sponsor, help build, which is basically a kitchen, not in terms of to cook food, but it's like a live demonstration of what you need to cook for diabetic purposes. So there's all different models of different types of food and things that, because a lot of people don't know about brown rice and you know, basically the lower GI foods and things like that. So that's who they are, and I do support them. And I came up with the idea of having a diabetic day in Watford we're asking all the local pharmacists. It's in July. I can't remember the exact date, I'm afraid, but it's on the Saturday in July, where every pharmacist in Watford will agree to give free diabetic tests to anyone that walks in on a Saturday. And it's all about awareness, this. And obviously you don't need to be a doctor to do a diabetic test, but the chemists have all got the equipment and everything like that. So I'm helping them with that. And the question was actually expanding from that with the expansion of the new health campus in Watford. Now, the health campus is not the redevelopment of the hospital. There has been some confusion about this. It's the development of all of the land around the hospital, and it's actually a big urban regeneration site, of which my role of it was to arrange for the funds to provide a road to take all the traffic away from Vicarage Road, for those who are familiar with it, down to the other, where the Irish Club is and things like that. The road will bypass, effectively it's a link road. Anyway, but the importance of it to me is not just the jobs and everything that it will provide in the redevelopment, but it's the precursor to a redevelopment of the hospital. But the hospital is owned by the Hospital Trust. They need to become, and they are under the very competent new Chief Executive, Samantha Jones, developing plans to become an independent trust. And I'm waiting for a proposal for the redevelopment of the hospital. And it's my job to go into bat with government to help them get the money for that. But they're not yet at that stage.
Yeah.
So it's all linked together. A bit of misinformation has gone around about the health campus is a new hospital. That really isn't the case. And the plans, I think they're excellent plans, and certainly know one or two big companies that are hoping to locate there.
I mean, when I looked at the plans, it didn't seem that there was anything in the health campus about health.
It's an urban regeneration development. I mean, they call it the health campus, which I suppose the council and the hospital named it. Fine, it's a campus around the hospital, but to me, it's a precursor to a major redevelopment and a precursor to the development of a hospital. Because Watford Hospital varies from really old stuff like the maternity unit. Actually, we get the most satisfaction things from the oldest bit of the hospital,
really?
Which is the maternity thing. To the newest bit, which is next to A&E, there's an intensive care unit.
Yeah.
Which I hope people haven't been in, because obviously that meant they were very ill. But it's a modern facility, and most of it it's the way it's evolved and sprawled. And the problem with the hospital is you can't just suddenly say we're going to demolish everything. Oh, it takes 5 years to build a new one. I mean, it has to be done in phases.
Yeah.
So I took Jeremy Hunt. When he became Secretary of State, I asked him to do a shift in Watford Hospital in A&E, which he did. By the way, Ed Miliband has as well. And it's because politicians basically are quite lazy and enjoy a place near to London so they can get back. Fair enough. They don't want to start going up to Inverness for that reason. And Watford's convenient for that. And for me, we take advantage of things like that.
Yeah.
Because if you bring a minister to a place, for example, I got some funds for a new birthing unit at the maternity thing, because I happened to bring the minister that was responsible. The hospital had the proposal ready, and it was a lot easier if in the proposal we could say, oh, the minister's seen it. So I learned all that political game in the last 4 years. I didn't have a clue about it before. And it's really interesting seeing the way government works, because at the one end, it's very complex and bureaucratic. Of course it is. It's public money and millions and millions of pounds of it. You can't just say, someone say, well, that seems a good idea, tick. But you actually, on the other hand, you can sell a case quite quickly, particularly if you're near London, by getting a couple of key civil servants and a minister to come and look at it. And this isn't actually part of the hospital, but the most exciting thing I've done by bringing a minister to Watford is the development of the new University Technical College, which will open in September.
It's in Bushy, isn't it?
No, it's in Colonial Way.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's right.
Excuse me. The former Sanyo building.
Just off Radlett Road, yeah.
Yeah. And it's a fantastic idea, this UTC, because it provides kids with, well, in the mornings they have a normal kind of education, GCSEs, etc., in the normal way. In the afternoons they study a specialist subject. And I had to convince the government, Department of Education, because you have to provide a specialist subject where there is employment in your area. So, for example, much as I'd have loved to have done something on mechanical engineering, JC Bamford are not based in Watford. So you can't just magic up something, because you have to get companies to sponsor it. So I wanted Watford to be one of the first in the country to do this. I chose hotels, hospitality and event management, because Hilton's are based here, and they agreed to sponsor that side of the course. But sponsoring
and Wetherspoons.
Yes, Wetherspoons as well. So sponsoring it involves actually it's not money, but you help the management help design the course.
Right.
So they are teaching young people what they want when it comes to applying for a job, and it's giving work experience and all that kind of thing, and hopefully apprenticeships or helping people at university, knowing that they'll be coming to work for them. So half of you're allowed 2 specialist subjects. One has to be technical. So for the technical one, I chose IT, simply because there's a lot of small software companies and everything around, and that's opening at the beginning of September.
Fantastic.
So you can get things done more quickly than you think. But the problem with hospitals, to get back to hospitals, it's so complex. I mean, a school of 400 or 500 kids, I mean, it's important, of course it is, but you can more or less predict demand. You know there's tons of kids, you know what the demographics are, and you know a good quality alternative education is going to be a good thing. Of course, hospitals they're forecasting a lot of really complex stuff, including the way lifestyles change, the way treatment needs change. You know, there's more stuff going to be done in doctor surgeries in future, these polyclinics. So that really is very complex, and consequently the public funding side of it is much, much, much more complex than just getting some money for one building and fitting it out and opening a school.
Brilliant. So,
sorry,
I was just going to say, I think Alex has got some more questions from people. Do you want to come in with another question, Alex?
Yeah, you touched on it briefly, Rich, but there's a question from Catherine Borden, who actually is part of the Michael Green Foundation, and she's kind of wanting to know, have you had any response from the Managing Director of Watford Borough Council in regards to the West Watford Link Road?
It's a touchy one there, Alex, with West Watford Link Road. This is the road I was explaining. Now, I envisaged it to be a road that anybody could use, because it's costing quite a lot of public money. I think it's a total of £10 million, which I was responsible for getting 7 million from a fund the government had for infrastructure. The hospital and the council envisage it to be an access road for the health campus. So ambulances, yes, they can use it, or people coming to the hospital to visit, or staff, this sort of thing. Now, I think, much important though ambulances are now, they have to fight through the whole of Vicarage Road and everything. And I think, of course, this should be given priority. But I think it's just a waste of an opportunity to take some of the huge traffic away from the bushy arches and all that stuff around there, which is clogged up. Some mornings it's clogged up by 7:30 in the morning. And there's a huge furore about it. I've been accused of using it for political purposes. I mean, how can a road be for political purposes? But that's what politicians say. I've been accused of knowing all the time that it was never going to be just a public road and everything, and you know, it's all, to me, I'm afraid perhaps I view it from more of a business point of view. You know, this money is spent on it, there's a big traffic problem, why not as a byproduct have it just open to the public? And also for the health campus itself, there's a lot of public money going into it, I support that. Why shouldn't the public generally get some benefit out of it until there's a new hospital? And that is having a full access. So it's become a bit of a cause célèbre, Alex. It shouldn't have been. I certainly did not intend or wouldn't dream of doing it for political purposes, but there are cynics amongst the professional politicians around. Maybe I'm naive, and maybe after only doing it for 4 years, it's a bit of a naive thing, but to me, it's just obvious. You're spending all that money. Why on earth wouldn't you just have it out? Because much as important though ambulances are, I mean, maybe there's 3 or 4 in an hour. I understand that, but blue lights should always get priority over everything. Of course they should. And even with the staff, they go in at one time and come out at another time. So I want it fully open. I want it linked through. But the council's the planning authority. You know, we'll see what happens.
Chris, did you have any questions? I know you may have picked some up during the week from speaking to people.
I mean, there's a couple of things that are sort of hanging around, which I'm not quite sure whether they've been finalised or not. Is the Metropolitan Station actually going? Because
yes,
it is definitely not.
Because it's out on a spur, you see, and with the Croxley rail link, so it will go Croxley, Ascot Road, which is the new one, which is a short walk from the current station, West Watford, which is Vicarage Road, to Watford Junction.
Because I mean, there'll be a significant impact with the kid. Because I mean, I used to go to Watford Grammar School, and
that would explain a lot.
And there were a lot of people that came up from places like, from Harrow, but not only that, but Carpenter's Park, and they come up on there and they would get off. It's just a short walk around the corner. But now,
we're not from Carpenter's Park, because obviously that's the Euston line. But they used to.
They used to be on the Metro, wasn't it?
It used to be,
but
not for many years. No, yeah, you're right. But they did a lot of research on it. There was a public inquiry. Half the people that live by Watford Met Station walk to the junction because it's much quicker to go in. Then, of course, there's the people that live to the south towards Whippendale Road. Well, Ascot Road's nearer for them rather than walking. So it's not a simple thing, but it couldn't stay over because it's on a spur. And it was always intended to go through all that land, which was agricultural. Now, of course, it's all built up. But obviously, 100 years later, that couldn't happen. So, yes, that is right, Chris. It is closing.
And someone asked me, it was last Friday actually, about the apprentices, the apprenticeships. They mentioned that earlier. What, in terms of apprenticeships, are there any concrete figures about apprenticeships in Watford and the success of that?
In 2 years, the number of apprenticeships has more than doubled in Watford, from 400 and something to actually it's nearly 1,000 now have been created, and it's done by the companies they're incented to give apprenticeships. First of all, there's no national insurance on the apprenticeships, and each company, up to the first 3, most of it's paid for by the government. It's up to a certain amount, but effectively it's 3, which doesn't sound very much, but a lot of the trick is persuading small companies to take on apprenticeships. And I and other MPs, I'm going to hold an apprenticeship fair, write to every single small company saying, have you thought of taking on an apprentice? You might not be able to afford a full salary, but have you thought of taking on an apprentice? The government provide the training. Because people think of apprenticeships as basically bloke in boiler suit with a spanner, sort of lying under a lorry or something like that. But a lot of the apprenticeships are in things like IT, business administration, caring, being a carer. I mean, it's actual qualifications in things where, there are jobs. And I just think now with tuition fees as they are, probably a lot of kids and their parents are thinking, well, to get £40,000-50,000 in debt, will I be better off to do an apprenticeship where I'm getting some pay, get some training, and by the time it comes to university time, have 3 years experience under my belt? So that, combined with the University Technical College in Watford, I think will make it significant breakthrough. Not for people, most of the kids that went to your former school, Chris, and I'm sure just as many will go to university. But it used to be, if you didn't go to university, well, what? Well, now there's a big answer to that one. And my jobs and apprenticeship fair taking place the week after next. If anyone wants to email me or call me, I'll give them details. There's nearly 1,000 jobs and apprenticeships available, and I hope lots of people will come. And some schools, like Westfield College, are having the whole of the sixth form are coming, and we do a big seminar about all the different jobs available and that sort of thing.
Right. What about the group that are 50 plus? Now, this is an interesting area. I've been working with an organisation called Prime, which is, I think, a Prince of Wales Trust organisation, and they basically they're taking the people that are made redundant around the 50 age group. Now, they've got 20 years left, and only 1 in 5 get reemployed.
And that's the hardcore unemployment in Watford, are people 50 plus. People that I might be after May of next year, Chris, if a lot of the electorate get their way. But it's a serious, I make a joke, it's a serious point, because lots of people, the typical person in Watford has worked for the same company often for 30 years. They don't know another way of life, not because they're stupid, but they've never had to do a CV or an interview, and they've had what they thought was a secure job. Often in Watford, that would be in the rump of the printing industry, but you can be sure it's true in nearly every other town in the country and what they'd specialised in. And suddenly, they were made redundant. Often not without money, because if people have worked for the same company and they're made redundant for a long time, they'll get a cheque, but it hits them like a sledgehammer on the head. And it's not that easy as it is with younger people, because most employers don't want to start employing someone in their mid-50s, thinking, well, they're going to retire soon and I've got to retrain them, whereas the average 18-year-old's already a whiz with Excel and Word, and all this sort of thing. And the government schemes, they put a lot of effort into retraining people. So, for example, I met a chap at Watford Job Centre Plus who he was a plumber, but he'd always worked for one of the big construction companies for years. I think it was Balfour Beatty, maybe not, but it's doing like big scale, like a big complex or like the Olympics he worked on, this sort of big stuff. He wouldn't know how to service someone's boiler in their house. So part of the retraining would be to take the skill he's got, and in that case there was a corgi course for this boiler type stuff that they do, and then help people become self-employed or try and translate a skill. But it is difficult. It really is. I think it's the most sensitive area.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard stories because I talk to a lot of people about going along to the job centre, and they get because they have to go to an interview to maintain their benefits, and being sent on an interview which neither the person who's doing the interviewing or the person that's being interviewed see the benefit particularly of the interview, but it's like it's got to be done. And it becomes almost like a rubber stamping exercise. And of course, from the job centre perspective, they're doing the statistics because they're sending people on interviews. But in actual fact, neither party wins.
Yeah, neither party wins in a way. But in the end, people get jobs. I mean, we can see by the way that it's coming down. And it's interesting that of the people, the last time I did a full survey down at the job centre, summer before last, there was about 2,500 people on job seekers. There's now 1,400 in Watford. But it's interesting, it broke into roughly 3 equal thirds. I imagine now it's the same, but with 1,400 obviously it's fewer people. But say then for argument's sake it was 2,000, but to make the maths even. A third of them, which then would have been about 650, were people who had, well, in the normal course of things, people do lose their job or change their job. I could tell that because it rotated around every 8 weeks. So the normal course thing is you lose your job, go to the job centre, do a TV, go on some interviews, etc. In the meantime, why shouldn't they claim they've been paying their tax, national insurance, etc.? That's what the system's for. The second, well, the remaining 2/3 were split almost evenly between people like Chris was talking about, people of actually my kind of age, and I've been through that. It's not easy, and it hits them in the worst possible way. But a sizable chunk of what's left are people that have never had a job. And in Watford, not to have a job actually means you don't want one. Because there are jobs. I'm not saying it's easy, you can't walk into anything you want, but there are jobs. We know that by the way the numbers come down. And it's easy to sit here talking as someone who started working on Saturdays when I was 10 years old, and if I'd have decided not to, I think my mother would have kicked me out, and whatever, paper rounds and that sort of stuff, as a lot of people do. But if you've never been to work and you've been brought up in a house or flat that no one has ever been to work, you've educated for 10 years and can hardly read and write, and I'm not exaggerating. Actually, it's a lot harder to get a job and to have the discipline and self-esteem to do it. And whilst that number has come down quite a lot, in the end, they're having to say to people that it is not an acceptable lifestyle to be on benefits as a choice. Obviously, if people are sick or they lose their job, obviously that's what the system's for. But it's not going to be a choice now where you can say, I just want to be on benefits. And people are signing on now, they sign an employment contract between the Department of Work and Pensions and themselves, and it's just like any employment contract. You've got to work so many hours a week, your job is looking for a job. You get paid your benefits for looking for a job. If you're not looking for a job, and I accept some of your box ticking might come in, but how else do you measure whether people are going, except going on interviews and courses and things? Well, you lose your benefits. And I think we're seeing society and those individuals that are in work, we're seeing the plus point side of that. Because everybody knows that someone would rather be in work than not be in work. For self-esteem, prestige in society, prospects, also money. People, all this talk fired up by certain newspapers that people, on benefits live in, townhouses in Knightsbridge with 10 children on 100 grand a year. Well, I've certainly not seen it. It's pretty grim being on benefits, and I think people would rather work, and I think people in the end, well, it sounds very patronising, but people I've spoken to who, even after lengthy periods of not working, who do work, feel a lot better in themselves. But society has changed. Benefits were meant with the best intentions. Who wants people that were on what used to be called national assistance, where people barely had shoes on their feet and went to soup kitchens, and that was only for a few weeks? But of course, society moves completely the other way. Benefits become a right. everybody's able to get it at the blink of an eyelid, and people get annoyed. My constituents get annoyed when they see an able-bodied person next door. They're going off at 4, 5, 6 in the morning to be a postman or whatever their job happens to be, and they see the other people not. And you know, it really is something that society's had to change. And I'm very pleased to say that the government, Conservatives and Liberal Democrats, the coalition, has got to grips with this issue. And we're all very united on it. And I'd like to see more money spent on benefits for people that really need it. I think people on real disabilities don't get enough. And that should come from the savings, from pushing people who are able-bodied and could work to do it.
Okay, guys, I just need to come in there. Brilliant conversation and discussion, but I'm just watching the time and we're almost out of time. So I want to go quickly to Alex and just say, Alex, have you got any last minute things that you either want to say to Richard or bring up?
No, nothing really to bring up. Just want to thank Richard for spending some time with us. Just thanks for coming on.
Enjoyed it, Alex, very much.
Thank you.
And I just want to say it's been absolutely fascinating, and I am so glad that you came on. And I hope that this is going to be the beginning of a lot more hangouts with MPs and maybe even ministers and even more. You know, in America, President Obama regularly does fireside chats where he actually allows his constituents to come inside, like Alex and I are inside the hangout with you today, Richard. They actually let people come in to ask the questions. So I'm hoping that maybe you're going to go back and persuade a few more people to actually come and join shows like this and even create their own shows like this.
Carol, it's the first time in my life that I've been used in the same sentence as President Obama, so maybe there is hope.
And you know, I want to say a really big thank you, obviously, because it's been really great that you've come on. I think it's great for Learn4Growth to see that Learn4Growth is actually very innovative and bringing people and guests and community TV in ways that haven't been done before. And a massive thank you to you, Richard, for spending a whole hour with us and talking so openly and expressing your opinion so openly as well.
It's a huge pleasure. So do I discuss the fee with Chris then? Or?
Sorry, the technology seems to be breaking down now.
I enjoyed it, Alex. Carol,
thank you.
And Chris, really enjoyed it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so we are going. Chris, any last minute things you want to say before I click the button?
No, just I think that it would be really good if, you know, like during your election year, because obviously you're going to focus on doing the things that you're here to do, but it would be good to do this again at some point and just get a catch up, because I actually think this type of technology, this kind of methodology that we're using here, will bring the electorate closer to the MPs.
I'm sure
and
it will.
It has to bring engagement up.
It's got to. It really has. And hopefully young people will...
Yeah, they'll engage with
involved.
it. It's all on YouTube, so this is all being recorded on YouTube. So if people don't make it to see the show live, they can watch it later on. I know I've got about 10 or 15 people I've personally spoken to who can't be here to watch it live, but they're going to be interested in what you say later. So that's it.
Okay, great. So,
All right.
on that note, we will close.
Okay, cheerio.